I'll tell you where the Buccaneers stack up against the rest of the NFL. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at @JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you 3 days a week for right now. We'll get back into the 5 days a week, off and on throughout this slow period, but at least 3 days a week for the month of June. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support of the show. Right now, one of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No ads, no hashtags, nothing like that. Just genuine conversations via text. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. The Buccaneers made a couple of moves at wide receiver, and there's some not so great news regarding a former Buccaneers receiver. More on that coming up in a little bit, but let's start things off with a question that I got from Mad Dog that stems from something he saw on the Rich Eisen show. Now, I'm going to start by saying this. I absolutely love Rich Eisen. He is probably my favorite sports media personality and has been for quite some time. One of the coolest moments of my media career was getting to meet Rich Eisen at the scouting combine. That was next level awesome for me, but that doesn't mean that I have to agree with him all the time. So Rich Eisen dropped his way too early power rankings in the NFL, and it was as follows. At number 10, he had the Los Angeles Rams. At number 9, the Dallas Cowboys. Number 8, the New York Jets. Number 7, the Cleveland Browns. Number 6, the Green Bay Packers. Number 5, the Houston Texans. 4 was the Detroit Lions. 3, the Baltimore Ravens. 2, the Kansas City Chiefs. And number 1, the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I will say this about Rich Eisen's rankings. I am so relieved that he didn't have the Bears or the Falcons on there, as so many people want to prop them up as these elite franchises right now because they won the offseason. But with that said, I still don't really like these rankings. A lot of disagreements with Rich on that top 10. So Mad Dog, when he sent me that video, asked me what my way too early top 10 power rankings were for the NFL, and here you go. At number 10, I do have the Dallas Cowboys, as much as it pained me to do so. I still think that they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. Dak Prescott is what he is. You know that the Cowboys are going to choke at some point, but on paper, heading into the season, I would put them at number 10. At number 9, the Miami Dolphins. No one in the NFL can compete with their speed. They've made upgrades across the roster. I'm expecting big things out of Tua Tagovailoa this season. A lot of people don't like him. I do. I think he's a really, really reliable quarterback. And with Tyreek Hill and all of the weapons that they have there in Miami, I think they're just going to continue to get better each and every year. Not to mention, I absolutely love their head coach. They struggled some last year against teams above 500. I think every year the McDaniel is there, the Dolphins are going to get a little bit better. So I have them at number 9. At number 8, I do have the Green Bay Packers. If Jordan Love can replicate the second half of the season that he had last year, Green Bay is going to be a dangerous team this season, not to mention the addition of Josh Jacobs there to help the run game. Their defense has improved. They have one of the better corners in the NFL. I do like the Packers roster, and I think they can do some damage there within their own division. At number 7, I have the Buffalo Bills. I know a lot of people are writing them off. Josh Allen just always seems to find a way to get the job done. So it doesn't matter that Stephon Diggs is gone. That is completely irrelevant to me. They are going to figure out a way to win games and make their way to the postseason. At number 6, the Philadelphia Eagles. They are not going to have the implosion that they had last year. They are way too talented of a team to be outside of the top 10. They've made some coaching changes. They have a new OC. They have a new DC. That team is going to be much better than they were last year. Number 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson is a weapon both with his arm and his legs. Their defense is always good. The big question with them, as always, is what do they do at wide receiver? Because they can't seem to ever get that position right. Oh, and by the way, they added Derrick Henry. That's going to be another weapon for them. At number 4, the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know how the Bengals get left off of Rich Eisen's top 10. Joe Burrow, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. You can put Mahomes up there. I think if I'm starting a franchise right now today and I have my pick of anybody in the NFL, I am starting my franchise with Joe Burrow over Patrick Mahomes. Jamar Chase, uber talented. T. Higgins, they're going to get all that stuff sorted out. The defense, they have one more run left in them with a lot of these big name players there. The Cincinnati Bengals are absolutely a force, and we know that they can beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And number 3, the Detroit Lions. I didn't think I would ever see the day that I would have the Detroit Lions in my top 3 of NFL teams, but here they are. Number 2, the San Francisco 49ers. They're still the class of the NFC. Number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs. They are the back-to-back defending champions. Until someone knocks them off the top, they have to stay there. And I know what you're saying. James, where are the Bucs? I have the Bucs at number 11. I think they are the best team in the NFC South and the next best team between the two conferences after this top 10. You can throw the Texans up there, but I need to see more than 1 year out of that group with CJ Stroud and the coaching staff. I know they got Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell was great and Nico Collins was great and all of that. But I need to see more than 1 year before I can really start to crown them. I think they're the best team in the AFC South, but I give the Bucs a slight edge in what essentially amounted to a coin flip. You can throw Cleveland in there strictly based on the defense. Watson has been an absolute disaster, but the rest of the roster is really good. Just a big cloud hanging over the quarterback position. I would say that the Steelers will find themselves in the mix because Tomlin always seems to figure things out and somehow manage to be above 500. The Rams are in the mix, but a lot like Cleveland, I think they have a cloud hanging over the quarterback, given the injury issues that Stafford has had over the last few years. Cooper Kupp has not been the same since 2021. And then, of course, I think the Jets are in the mix, but can Aaron Rodgers get the job done at 40 years old coming off an Achilles rupture? Overall, the Bucs can hang with anyone in my or Eisen's top 10 if they don't beat themselves, because they have some of the most talented players in the league at key positions. The Bucs receiving duo is as good or better than every team on that list. The Bucs have the best safety, arguably the best left tackle, the most consistent inside linebacker, the best nose tackle of any teams on those lists. And they have one of the best pass catching running backs of any of the teams on those lists. If they play the way they're capable of and not make stupid mistakes, there is absolutely no reason that they can't go toe to toe with any team in the league. But it's about getting the job done and winning those one-on-one battles and not beating themselves. Gonna jump into the chat real quick. Demon Hunter in the chat says, I asked James already. I'll ask the rest of you as well. What rookie not named Barton do you think has the biggest impact this season? Demon Hunter, I'm going to answer that question on tomorrow's episode. I couldn't squeeze it into this one. I will get to that answer, but some of the answers in the chat. Fausto says either McMillan or Smith. David Stacks says Braswell. I want to have a different answer than everyone else. Demon Hunter says, I'll take that, David. We do have Chet in the chat. Chet, are you a newcomer to the chat? Because I haven't seen you in here very often. Thanks for joining. He says, Boomer Sooner. We are going to talk about those Sooners as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers brought in a couple of receivers, including a boomer Sooner and one of Baker's former favorite targets. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I want to say how I am really feeling about something, and you might even be thinking the same thing this week. We have reached the stage in the year where it feels like forever before we get to football season. Yeah, there's OTAs and mini camps, but it feels like training camp will never get here, and everyone just wants to see their favorite team hit the field. It's almost as if it leaves that empty feeling, and that summer is going to last forever. Well, most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams or what sports season it is, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while, no matter how big, no matter how small, and therapy can be different for everyone. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, and you can get things off your chest to a licensed therapist, and you can change therapists at any time. No questions asked. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I got a ton of great questions from the insiders. I'm going to talk about those coming up on tomorrow's episode, and I do still have my Jalen McMillan breakdown coming for you. Got a little caught up in Columbus with my son's hockey yesterday. Wasn't able to really put it all together in a coherent episode, and there's plenty of other things that need to be addressed first. In the meantime, you want to hear the latest news from all around the sports world, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, NFL news, because the NFL never sleeps. But you want to hear more than just a national narrative, and you want the biggest stories without the screaming. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So 2 moves for the Buccaneers at receiver. First, they signed former Seahawks receiver Cody Thompson on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, they signed former New York Giants and Oklahoma Sooners wide receiver Sterling Shepard. Let's start with Thompson, who I'm sure many of you are going, who? Well, Thompson came out of the University of Toledo and has played since 2021. He has 1 career catch on 1 career target for a total of 10 yards in a total of 12 games played. He was not on the roster in Seattle in 2022, played 5 games in 2021 and 7 games in 2023. Over those 2 seasons, he took just 27 offensive snaps, but he took 140 special team snaps, just not as a returner. He was a gunner. So this move is likely a competition for him to try to make the roster as a special teamer, but that mountain just got a whole lot higher and a whole lot steeper with the move the Buccaneers made on Thursday. Sterling Shepard, a 2nd-round pick out of Oklahoma by the Giants in 2016, has spent his entire career in New York until now, agreeing to a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers. His best season came in 2018 when he had 66 receptions for 872 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, his career high in touchdowns came in his rookie season. He had 8 in that rookie year. His career high in receptions was a tie between that 2018 season that I just rattled off and 2020. He had 66 catches in each of those 2 years. He had a rough stretch from 2021 to 2022. He played a total of 10 games between those 2 seasons before getting back on track last year and playing 15. But Shepard averages 11 yards per catch over the course of his career, and he has return experience. His rookie season, he worked as a kick returner. Last year, he got some work as a punt returner. The road for Shepard to make this team is not an easy one. You already have 4 receivers locked and loaded: Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, and Trey Palmer. If the Bucs carry 6, there's a really, really, really good chance that Shepard makes this team. If they carry 5, that's another very highly contested and heated competition for the final spot between Shepard, Raheem Jarrett, Cephas Johnson, Cody Thompson, Ryan Miller, a few other undrafted rookies sprinkled in there. Of course, some of those guys could end up on the practice squad, but although this signing is very intriguing, Shepard's spot on the roster is far from guaranteed. I look at this a lot like the David Moore signing last year, or the stints that Brashad Perryman had with the Bucs. He may get you a handful of meaningful catches, might get about 5 to 10% of snaps on any given week. But if he has a big chunk of the snap percentage, it's probably because somebody got hurt, and that is really, really bad news. I do like Sterling Shepard a lot. I liked him coming out of college. And if memory serves correctly, David Harrison and I got into a bit of a debate on this show when he was a pending free agent. And I mentioned him as someone I would like to see the Buccaneers side. But heading into year 9 for Shepard, he isn't going to reach the potential that I thought he once had. Of course, that potential was kind of cut off being stuck with the Giants and their dumpster fire of an organization, and the dumpster fire that has been their quarterback position for the better part of a decade now. But Shepard could be a reliable depth guy that can get you a first down here and there. He can help you on special teams if needed, and could have a key play in a game or two, much like those 2 guys that I mentioned earlier in David Moore and Brashad Perryman. You all remember David Moore coming up big against the Green Bay Packers, and then in the playoffs against the Philadelphia Eagles. You can go back and point to Brashad Perryman being a big contributor in that comeback win against the Jets, the overtime win against the Buffalo Bills. So there's going to be a couple of key moments here and there where Shepard really could step up and be a big contributor if he makes the team. And I do feel that it's worth noting that Shepard was Baker Mayfield's leading receiver at Oklahoma back in 2015 with 86 receptions, 1,288 yards, and 11 touchdowns. This is a player that Baker certainly has a level of trust in, and that is going to play a big factor during training camp, during mini camp, during the preseason and the lead up to these roster cuts. And, if he's on the bubble and they sit down and they say, look, do you want Sterling Shepard as part of this offense, or do you want Raheem Jarrett, or do you want Cody Thompson or Cephas Johnson? Baker's probably going to lean more towards Sterling Shepard because of the rapport that they had in college, the trust that he already has in him, the abilities that Baker knows that Shepard possesses. And really, I think Shepard would be an absolutely phenomenal fit within this wide receiver room, could add a little something more than some of the other guys that are going to be vying for that job can offer. So I don't think this is an earth-shattering signing or anything like that, but it's a smart, affordable move for the Buccaneers to get more depth at a position that's been hit by injuries over the last few years. And then again, of course, that familiarity and trust with Baker Mayfield certainly does not hurt things. I want to jump into the chat real quick. Again, Fausto says Shepard is dirt cheap. That is absolutely 100% accurate. When you're a free agent wide receiver into the month of June, you're not going to be costing a lot of money. Ward, Fausto, looks like you were replying to Ward in the chat, says, how can we afford Shepard? Who's on the trade block? I don't think there's anybody on the trade block. They released Devin Tomkins. Ryan Jensen was placed on the retired list. They have some spots that they can move around, bringing in more bodies for camp. And then, Shepard is probably I don't have the contract details yet. I can update those on tomorrow's episode, but you're probably looking at a veteran minimum deal, maybe with some incentives thrown in there based on production, snap counts, things like that, a roster bonus of some sort, but he is certainly not going to be expensive. I would honestly be surprised if he costs much more than Jalen McMillan does this season. Let's Let's see. We have BB King. Love the music. He's in the chat saying Cam Johnson could make the team as a returner. They have a lot of different options for returner. There's a couple of guys, especially, I talked about it with Bucky Irving, Jalen McMillan. They could be in the mix. You have Chase Edmonds, who has return experience. You have, a couple of these wide receivers. Trey Palmer certainly is in the mix for a returner job. And of course, now you have Sterling Shepard, who has return experience. That's going to be a fun competition to watch. And they're probably going to play with quite a few combinations, given the fact that each team is going to have two guys back to return kicks. And then Jason in the chat just says, let's go Buccaneers. Yeah, pretty much. Some unfortunate news to talk about regarding a former Buck and what it means for the team. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. GameTime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Some of you probably saw on Twitter or heard on the show that I was able to take my son to Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. What an amazing moment that was to have that father-son experience with him, and he was able to root on his Celtics. And I would love nothing more than to take him to an NBA Finals game in Boston. Getting the tickets on GameTime would be the easy part. It's the rest of the trip that would be difficult to figure out. With GameTime, I could wait until the last minute as prices begin to drop, or even wait until after tip when prices go down as much as 60%. The process is as easy as you can get. I can use Apple Pay and have those tickets on my phone in just 2 clicks, and no surprises either. With all-in pricing, I would know exactly what I would spend when I'm looking for the seats that we would be going for. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping things up here on a live Thursday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And I'm going to start this off by giving a warning that the following topic is a little sensitive, but I'm going to keep that portion of this brief, and I'm going to do my best to choose my words very carefully. This is not something that I generally talk about on this show, and it's not something that I want to talk about or that I hope to talk about again in the future. All of that said, former Buccaneers wide receiver Devin Tomkins has been accused by his wife of physical abuse. His wife posted pictures with locations and timestamps as well as videos on her TikTok account discussing things she allegedly endured. Devin Tomkins, through his lawyers, denies these allegations and claims that it's basically because they are going through a divorce with custody hearings. I am not going to go into details of the TikTok videos. I am not going to read Devin Tompkins' statement through his lawyers word for word. I am simply letting you all know what is happening for the context of what I'm going to say next. Here's the thing. I saw a lot of people on social media talking about how this explains Devin Tompkins' release from the team. And I also saw people going after Todd Bowles for one of two things, either being a liar or for excusing this alleged behavior by saying, following Tompkins' release, that they would welcome him back. My opinion on this matter, yes, my opinion, as in I do not have any inside information, nor have I spoken with anyone within the organization about this situation. This is simply me reacting with what I personally believe happened. My opinion on the matter is that the Buccaneers did not know about these allegations or that these allegations were going to come forward at the time of Devin Tomkins' release. Now, I realize the timing is making people pause, but if the Bucs were aware, I don't think they would have released him with an injury designation. It would have been just a flat out release. The injury designation allowed them to bring him back and place him on injured reserve, and they would have had no interest in doing so had they known. I think the same rationale applies when looking at Todd Bowles in the statement he made. Tompkins was released based on an injury, and if the Bucs could have gotten him back on injured reserve, they likely would have done so had all of this not come out. That was the message that Todd Bowles was essentially trying to convey. Jason Light has spent a lot of time this offseason talking about the kinds of players and the kinds of people he wants being on this team and in that building. Devin Tomkins does not fit that mold in any way, shape, or form if these things are true. And again, I am choosing my words very carefully here. You can vet, you can scout, you can interview until you're blue in the face. And sometimes you just cannot get the full story about a person. That doesn't mean a team was condoning that type of behavior or that they were turning a blind eye to it and pretending it wasn't happening. Looking at the state of the Kansas City Chiefs right now, it seems like every other week, someone else from that team is getting in trouble. That doesn't mean that the Chiefs are allowing it or condoning it or promoting it or anything like that. Players are going to make decisions, both good and bad, and teams end up having to be held responsible for those decisions and for those actions. Let's say for a moment that you are the one running a company. You don't know what every single one of your employees is doing during their time away. You don't know how they behave in their homes. You don't know what they're doing on their weekends. You don't know the kinds of people that your employees are hanging around. And if one of your employees gets arrested or gets in trouble, all you can do is react. Those kinds of situations or that kind of mindset is not going to come up in interviews or through background checks or by calling references. Think about all the references you've used on job applications. Are you going to give a reference of someone who's going to say, oh yeah, I see this guy get day drunk all the time? You're going to have them call references that are going to say glowing and wonderful things about you and your work ethic. For people to say that the Bucs were compliant or that Bowles is a bad person for saying Tompkins would be welcome back, to me is really short-sighted. The Buccaneers are one of the league's frontrunners in the inclusion of women within their franchise. Part of the ownership group is a woman. They had the first full-time woman assistant coach under Bruce Arians. They're leaders in the community with their women's flag football program and scholarship programs. The Buccaneers have been leaders in the league in that aspect. So to say the GM or the coach would ignore these types of accusations, to me, is just ignorant. That is where I stand on this matter. And as far as I'm concerned, it won't be brought up again on this show. The accusation was put out there, and the way I saw people react, I felt garnered a comment from me. But I am considering this matter closed as far as the Locked On Bucs podcast is concerned, and I will not be mentioning this case or these accusations on this show anymore moving forward. I appreciate each and every one of you who stuck with me through that. I know it's a very uncomfortable topic. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but with the mass reaction that I saw, and those types of things being lumped in, I felt it was my place to give my opinion on this platform as to where, knowing what I know about the Buccaneers organization as a whole, not about this situation specifically, I felt it garnered a reaction from me. Going to jump into the comments one more time before we get out of here. Let's see. We have BB King saying Bucs players were asked last year what teammate they wouldn't want to date their sister. Their answer, Devin Tomkins. I did see that. They also said Devin White. I think somebody said Vita Vea. I think a lot of that was said in jest and in fun. I'm not going to read any more into it than that. Demon Hunter says, thank you, James. Great show as always. Demon Hunter, thank you so much. I appreciate you each and every time you are in here. Yeah, and if I can find the comment, I just threw up Demon Hunter's chat. I think here it is. I want to make sure that I'm not putting anything up on the screen that I shouldn't. But yeah, Demon Hunter chat. I can't find your exact comment that Demon Hunter is referring to, but he says only 3 people know the truth: him, her, and God. And I think that is the perfect note to end this episode on. More mailbag questions coming up tomorrow, including Demon Hunters, as to which rookie I think will have the biggest impact this season, who isn't named Graham Barton. That and much more coming up on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Make sure you are following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, so every time I go live, you know about it, and you can join in on the live chat. And of course, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. I am on all of them. And become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.